People keep asking, who are we? Why do we exist? What's going to happen when we die? Why are the stars out there in the sky? Why does a triangle have 3 sides? Why does a square have 4 sides? Human destiny is to actually die. That's all we're doing. Every day we wake up, we are going to our destiny. Our destiny is to die. And what are we preparing for this destination? We are going to die. Now this is where sacred geometry comes into all of this. Sacred geometry gives us an idea of who we are, why we exist, and what is our destination. It gives us an idea. Now let's have a look.
Welcome back, David. Once again, the exploration continues.
Today, we're going to talk about sacred geometry.
Yes?
Sacred geometry is something that's very important. There is the Kabbalah and there is the 33rd degree. Once you understand the lies and the truths of the 33rd degree, then you can understand what is simple science in more of a true way without the lies. And sacred geometry involves shapes that we can see around us in the world, like triangles, squares, hexagons, octagons, pentagons, and there is just the basic mathematical shapes that are known as the Platonic solids. And all of this information about sacred geometry and the universe, I've put it in a new book, which is called Science of the Kaaba. And I will go through some information that's in this book now so that people can understand more about the Platonic solids, sacred geometry, or the secret geometry. This geometry and this science was actually called sacred, or sacre en français or Latin, like the Sacre Coeur or the Sacred Heart or the Big Secret, because they didn't want the ordinary people to know it. And this was another reason why, yes, during the Middle Ages, they were confiscating the Vatican and the boys. The leader of the Vatican, Papa or Baba or your father, hey, here, have a look, say hello to Daddy. Father, Papa, hi, hi. He's saying hello. Yes, and so what they did was they were confiscating all these books throughout Europe. And the Crusades were taking place against this strange group of people known as the Muslims. And these books that they were confiscating were mysteriously in the Arabic language. And Arabic was the language of science and geometry at the time in Europe, and people were studying it. So what was this science or sacred science that they were studying that the Vatican and the churches didn't want ordinary people to know? And who was the Vatican? The Vatican were the descendants of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the people who were behind the crucifixion, fiction as it's called, or the people who claimed that Jesus Christ is dead. He's dead, or they wanted him dead because Jesus Christ was teaching something. And what did this have to do about science? Well, let's go through some pages from my new book, Science of the Kaaba. And here is some things from my book. And I will go through some things from Nosovsky and from Fomenko and some other histories so that people can understand more about sacred geometry, or the secret geometry that they didn't want people to know, and what it has to do with life and death and why we exist and where we are going. And it is a fact that many people are ignoring. Our destination in life is to die. This is all we're doing. Every day we're getting closer to death. So who are we? Why do we exist? Were we created? Is there a creator? What does sacred geometry have to do with all of this? And what does it have to do with the Kaaba? I mean, look at the Platonic solids. first, or they call it platonic solids. They are just the five basic solids, or the shapes that we could see in flowers. Some flowers have got 3 petals, 3 sides. Some have got 4 petals. Some have got 5 petals. Some have got 6 petals, 7 petals, 8 petals, etc. And what does this have to do with the university graduation system? But the more we look at this and the sacred geometry, we will understand the history of Europe and the history of Jesus Christ himself. I mean, why were they confiscating all these scientific books throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance that were in the Arabic language? Why Arabic? That's another thing. Yeah, so let's have a look at this more deeply. And what does it have to do with the Kaaba in Mecca in the Middle East? Yeah, that's named after a cube, even though it's not the shape of a cube. But what actually is this place, and what does it have to do with sacred geometry? For example, the tetrahedron, and the cube, and the octahedron, and the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. I mean, what is sacred geometry about? Sacred geometry basically is the study of everything that is around you, like the stars, the trees, nature, human biology, water, and to basically understand how the system of the universe works. And once you understand the system and the principle, it's just basic science, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, geometry, and anything that is that could be provable. Like, for example, you could prove that a triangle has 3 sides. Yes, that is called sacred. It means it's fixed. Like a cube has 4 sides. So that is fixed. That is sacred. It's defined as sacred. Or sacre in French. Or beautiful, like sugar. Yes, or sacre in the Quran. These words. So sacred, and many people say it was a secret, because in the past, only the royal family that ruled the world learnt these sciences. And we can see this in the movies such as Dungeons and Dragons, The Wrath of the Dragon God, where the normal people, they show don't know anything, and the educated people understand science, and they look at things that are involved with magic. But we're going to go through the science, not the magic. But what is very shocking is what Professor Anatoly Fomenko points out, and Gleb Nosovsky, that sacred geometry and science and geometry and mathematics and many other things can be traced back to Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was not just a prophet, but one of the greatest professors ever. Now, according to official history, we're told that the Greeks were these scientists and these philosophers. And Fomenko and Nosovsky point out that science and philosophy go together, because once you understand the sacred geometry, that you could see a triangle has 3 sides, it's fixed. Who created this system? A cube has 4. And the mathematical equilibrium, like 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4. These fixed things are known as sacred science or sacred geometry. And Jesus Christ, he was from this royal family. Now, many people don't know about this history, and they're guessing, and now many people are waking up to this history, that there is a global elite or somebody from like one family at the top, and there's thousands of members because the family has grown over the centuries. Now, Fomenko describes this as the royal family or royal Christianity. Yes. And in the Muslim Quran, they are basically known as the Bani Israel, or the tribe of Israel. And they intermarried with other royal families and mixed in throughout the centuries. And Fomenko calls it royal Christianity. And Jesus Christ, one of the greatest scientists ever, yes, was from this royal family. And then when he came, he wanted to spread the message of this sacred science and sacred geometry so that the average person will know it. Whereas before the time of Jesus Christ, there was Moses who wanted who led a revolution. You know, that when he said, there is no other God except one God, and you shall not worship anybody or basically be the slave of anybody except God. Yes, and so it was like freedom. But Jesus Christ led a very big movement, and his movement was for people to be educated, to understand the sacred science and the sacred geometry. Now, they tell us throughout history that Euclid is the father of geometry. He's the great father of geometry. And basically they tell us in history that there were these Greek schools, philosophy and Greek schools for mathematics and geometry and science. But that history is a forgery, and the actual real schools were actually the schools that were set up by Jesus Christ and his followers. It was like an education system for the world to study this science, and from this science you will find God, or you will find the grand architect, what they say in Masonry, or Freemasonry if you want to call it. Yes, so Jesus Christ led this movement, and his followers were known as Apostolic Christianity, and they were known as the followers of peace, or Shalom, or the what we call the original Christians, and Shalom or Islam. Yes, or basically they were the original Muslims, original Christians, whatever you want to call them. So, and then a conflict started with what was known as the royal family that wanted to keep these secrets, or sacred, or sacre, this private information to themselves regarding this. And here we can see in the Quran it says what is over this secret, and what is this sacred or sacre, and it says over it or above it, or above. This is 19, and when this is very important, and 19 is the flower of life, and within the flower of life we basically find these platonic solids, and the flower of life represents everything, they say, in just basic geometric scientific terms. And when it is turned into 3 dimensions, into the world that we live in, it becomes 33. Like look at the spheres here in the picture, there's 33 of them, and this is like the limit. You can't go beyond this. This is existence itself. And then we see that from this royal family later on came a man called known as the Prophet Muhammad, and he continued in this same tradition, that the sacred geometry, yes, it was very important. And we hear of these schools known as madarash or madrasas, Islamic schools. And when we look at madar, it just means mother. Yes, for children to start studying in these schools. And Rash, we can see, comes from like Russia, or the Reich in Germany, the Reichstag, or Rash or Irish. And then, you know, the Arabic word in the Quran, when we look at it, here is Arsh, it means the throne. And then here we can see in the Quran, it says something that many people have not noticed. It says that the throne of God, or the Arsh, spreads from the heavens to the earth, basically everything. Yeah, so this is the 33rd degree, and you can't go beyond it. So that's why they were called Madarash. And so what people did in these schools were they were studying the Quran and memorizing it in the old world, and they started to study the sciences from this. And that's, we find these schools were actually in Europe. You can call them Platonic schools if you want, or these, you know, Greek schools that they called, you know, to study the sciences. But ancient Greece didn't exist. More information about that is in my book. Ancient Greece did not exist. They falsified the history to remove this history from the people of Europe, so, because basically they wanted Jesus Christ dead, because Jesus Christ wanted this sacred or sacre or sacred or secret to come out to the public. And this was part of the movement of enlightenment. yes, which many people say was the real Renaissance. Yes, and the 1,000 years that we see in Europe, the missing gap, during this 1,000 years, there was this great Arabic civilization, and all the works were in Arabic. Yes. So, but when we get back to these Platonic shapes, there's the five major Platonic solids. Yes, the tetrahedron, the cube, octahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron. So now, when we look at it, there is the five elements, the five main ones, four that you could see and one that's invisible. Yes, so there is the fire, earth, air, and water, and ether, which represents the universe, or Thor or Torah. The Torah. This is very important because the Torah basically came from the ether, what they say, just in simple scientific words, just basic words. They say, that it came from like God, or the ether, or something that we don't understand. And when we look at these shapes and examine them, we'll find from there the mathematics. We can actually figure out the elements. And we find these shapes everywhere, wherever we look around today. And these shapes actually form in water. Yes, it's very shocking. Just examine this video and have a look.
One bubble, the sphere is the most efficient shape. But as we add more bubbles, we see the geometry changing. So in this case, we've got 4 bubbles, and you can see them meeting at a point. But put a shape in the middle, we don't get a spherical bubble. We get, in fact, a little tetrahedron. With 4 faces, they're not exactly flat, they're parts of spheres. But each time the bubbles are trying to find the most efficient shape for the arrangement of bubbles. So now we've got 6 bubbles, we've got a little cube appearing in the middle. This is nature's laws at work. The universe is always trying to find the most efficient solution it can. And as we pop them, the bubbles change, finding the most efficient, until we're left with a sphere again.
It has no choice.
But what's most remarkable is that those solutions are so often neat geometric shapes.
Wow, that's a dodecahedron. That's fantastic. And they're almost perfect pentagons, aren't they? That's really surprising. They're not bulging really very much at all.
That's right. That's right.
So 12 bubbles around make 12 faces, and the most economical shape that they can make, the lowest energy, is the dodecahedron.
Yeah.
Now, what we have just seen is very amazing. Yes, this is water. Now, when rain falls from the sky, it falls from the sky to the ground, it reacts with the air, and it forms bubbles, and then it splashes onto the floor, it forms bubbles, and this is what we can see forming inside these bubbles. What we can actually see is in the center of these bubbles in water that we can see as water moves, it forms these shapes that we call the Platonic solids. And we can see when there is like 3 bubbles, 4 bubbles, 6 bubbles, then we find a cube, and then 12 bubbles, like the 12-hour clock, it forms a dodecahedron. And in case many people don't know what a dodecahedron is, yes, it's basically many pentagons around a cube. And that's where we get the Kaaba from, and the pentagon that has 5 sides. And the Muslims pray 5 times a day towards the Kaaba. Yeah, this is telling you something. There is more to this. It's a lot more advanced to do with this. And this is where we get the flower of life from. Yes, which basically represents everything in the universe and existence. But water is very important. In fact, in the Muslim Quran, it tells you, study water and study how it rains and falls and gives life to the earth, etc. But that's another long story. But now, going back to this sakar, or sacred, or this secret, it's a secret. Yeah, so the Quran says that this 19 is a secret, and the flower of life is made up of 19 circles. Yes, and basically the Quran goes on in what they call chapter 74, talking about this sakar, or sacred, and or this secret, and it says that those who are not the believers, they're going to say, what is God trying to show by this? And whereas those people who have faith, they are going to basically believe, and they're going to know that this is the truth. But that's another long story. But that's what the sacred or the sakar or the secret is, and it's to do with the 19. But there are, of course, the Kaaba is in fact, is visited by Muslims, and the Muslim religious book is the Quran. So now when we go to the Quran itself in chapter 45, it turns around and says that the Quran itself is these verses of God are being told to you in truth. And then it says, in what other things are you going to believe in, or what are the verses? Now, the word for verses here, it should be pointed out, it actually says the word ayat. So basically it's saying, these ayat of God, we are telling you in truth. Then in what hadith are you going to believe in, apart from God's ayat? So it says these ayat of God are being told, and the Quran basically tells you, it says to you, what are you going to believe in, or which hadith will you believe in apart from God's ayats? And now when we read in chapter 2, it tells you what the ayats, or these verses or things of God are. It says, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the alternation of the night and the day. Yes, and the ships which sail through the sea, which people use, and the rain which God sends down from the sky or the water, which makes the earth alive, giving birth to flowers, plants. And it says, looking at the moving creatures of all kinds that God has put in the world, and in the winds, and in the clouds. Yes. Which are between the sky and the earth. Inside these things are indeed the ayats of God for people of understanding, or educated people. So the ayats, or the verses, or the signs of God, are not only the Quran. It's in water. It's in many other things. You can find the ayats, or what they say in English, the verses, or the signs of God, are found in many other things, in rain, and in the earth, and the living creatures of all the kinds. So therefore, the ayats of God, which people say are the verses of God, yes, are not just the Quran, but it's in science, or that's where the word science and science means. So there is, of course, a fringe group of Muslims known as the Quranists, and Islamists, another group, and many of them say that, oh no, Islam is the Quran only. It is not. The ayats of God are in water. The ayats of God are in the Quran. So the signs of God, or the verses of God, are in the Quran and in water. This is according to the Quran. I'm reading their book that the Muslims have, and this is what their book says. Now here you can see on the screen, this is from Oxford Reference for the translation of the word ayat in the Quran. It usually means a verse of the Quran or a sign, and it refers to verses or chapters in the Quran, but it also, within the Quran itself, it refers to scientific evidence in nature, and in many other things. So therefore, there is no such thing as Quran alone or Quranist, because the verses or the signs of God, according to the Quran itself, are actually in these signs in nature and in the Quran also, in both. Yes, we can see this, just from the meaning of one word. And of course, Islamists and Quranists are trying to fool people, and they're telling lies just to invent their theories. But we will go through some of these signs or this science later on. Anatoly Fomenko, the historian who's written Fiction or Science, it should be pointed out he wrote them together with Gleb Nosovsky. Yes? not just by himself. So Gleb Nosovsky. So here is what Gleb Nosovsky has to say about Jesus Christ and science. Yes, and Euclid. Yes, Euclid is the alleged father of geometry. But let's hear what Gleb Nosovsky has to say.
Sacred history begins with Christ, and Christ lays the foundations of the modern world, modern civilization. From him comes not only modern theology but also modern science. According to the new chronology, Christ is also known to us as Euclid. Under his guidance, the book was written, which is the foundation of science in general. It's Euclid's Elements. This is pure science. Modern mathematics traces its roots back to Euclid's Elements, where an example of an axiomatic theory is provided. In other words, mathematics is an axiomatic theory. It's built on the basis of axioms, deductions, theorems, and lemmas. The school geometry, as we call it today, or Euclidean geometry, serves as the model, originating from Christ.
Ah, there we go. Yes, so as we could see, sacred history or sacred science, people could go back and listen again and again to what Gleb Nosovsky, the partner of Professor Anatoly Fomenko, has said. Sacred history, which is the sacred, like the Sakar, yes, or the secret history, which is connected to the sacred geometry and the sacred science, actually begins with Jesus Christ, for as far as we can go back. And it was Jesus Christ who laid the foundations of our modern world and our modern civilization. And from him comes this modern philosophy and religion. But not only this, modern science actually came the way we've got it today from Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was a prophet, a professor. And so what they did was they invented this character called Euclid, and they invented ancient Greece to hide this story. And so it's under the guidance of Jesus Christ, as Nosovsky points out, yes, that under his guidance we have based the foundation of science in general. And from this science, Jesus Christ laid the foundation for pure science and modern mathematics. Or basically, this system wouldn't be here today without Jesus Christ. So thanks and applause to Jesus Christ. So they call it Euclid's Elements in school. Yes, and Euclid is the father of geometry, one of the major fathers of mathematics. Yes, but ancient Greece didn't even exist. And so they call it Euclid's Elements in school geometry. Yes, what they call it. And this is the model that was created by Jesus Christ. But let's, oh, by the way, some people are saying I'm talking about Islam or I'm talking about Christianity. Fomenko and Nosovsky, what they showed is that they lied and they added on 1,000 years of history. And Islam and Christianity, people could read it here. This is from Anatoly Fomenko's books. But Islam was not a separate religion, nor was Christianity. They were both the same religion. And the separations took place in the Middle Ages around the time of the Renaissance. But here, you could see Euclid's geometry, or basically, you know, what is mathematics and geometry today, and algebra. Yes, what are these things? Yes, you could see the Platonic solids, they named after Plato, and another invented character, solid geometry, axioms, etc. You know, the pyramid, the cube, the square, the cone, the cylinder, everything. Yes, but anyway, but many people have realized, and they've come to the conclusion, Euclid did not exist. And many people have written about it. And they've said that Euclid's Elements and all these other books were rewritten to match Christian theology, especially Vatican theology, because the Jesuits and the boys rewrote these books. And it's very strange because there is no evidence that ancient Greek has existed. People could read my book for more information. But what they're telling us in history, oh, Euclid and the rest of ancient Greece and Rome was missing for 1,000 years, 1,000 years. Can you imagine right now if everything went missing for 1,000 years and then they rediscovered everything, all 1,000-year manuscripts and everything of Plato, Aristotle, and all the rest of it? Yes, but one thing that we do know is that during this so-called 1,000 years that they're calling the Dark Ages, yes, they're telling us that the world was dark and science was dead. But no, during this 1,000 years all over the world, there was a civilization called the Arabs. Yes, and they were the custodians or the masters of science and masters of technology. Yes, and notice that the word Arab is related to the word rabbi. It's not like the Arab race that we see today, but there were great centers in Italy, in France, in Spain, and throughout the Mediterranean of schools that were teaching in this Arabic or Arabi language. Yes, and Arabic was certainly, yes, people can check for this 1,000 years of darkness. Yes, for all the way up to the Renaissance, when they mysteriously found these Greek and Roman books, that Arabic was the language of science and technology. People could study this themselves. So then this leads to the question, yes, it leads to the question, if Jesus Christ was a professor and he was a scientist and he was a philosopher at the same time, yes, and mysteriously there was this great science for 1,000 years, and we do know about the 1,000-year kingdom reign of Jesus Christ. That's what we're told, 1,000-year reign of Christ. Now, this 1,000 years that they're calling the Dark Ages, and they're called the Arabs and the Arabic language in Europe, being used throughout Europe. People throughout Europe are learning this language if you want to understand science or geometry or technology. Yes, it means that Jesus Christ himself must have spoken Arabic. And not only that, the more we look at history itself, what we can find is that during this entire 1,000 years, yes, during the entire 1,000 years, the Jewish people spoke Arabic throughout the entire world. 80% of people who were called Jews spoke Arabic. During this time known as 1,000 years of darkness up to the Renaissance. So what language did Jesus Christ speak if his brothers, the Jewish people, throughout Spain, throughout France, throughout Italy, throughout Greece, wherever they were, the majority all the way through to India, yes, were speaking Arabic. I mean, it's a bit clear Jesus Christ must have spoken Arabic. Flamenco also found that Christ was this scientist, not just a preacher. And science complements religion, because Jesus Christ was trying to show by science, same like the Quran. Well, let's go back to chapter 2. It says that in the creation of the heavens and the earth, the sky, the stars, and in the alternation of the night and the day, like how the night turns into day, and the stars, the moon and the sun, and how it rains, and how the water falls, yes, and how the seeds grow, and how the plants are growing with the different shapes, yes, and how the plants die, and how all the other living creatures are, and how they live, and how the winds are moving and the clouds are moving. All these things are the science or the ayats of God for the people who are scientific and knowledgeable and who want to understand, are the understanding people. This is what it says in the Quran. So this is why I said that this Prophet Muhammad himself, yes, was continuing in the tradition of Jesus Christ, bringing the science back. And this science can be seen in the Kaaba, because the entire system of how the Muslims pray, how they wash, the number of times they pray, the locations that they pray, and everything that they're actually doing facing this Kaaba is based on this sacred geometry or secret geometry or the sacred geometry, yes, that Jesus Christ was showing to the world. Let's go into it a bit more about what we know about Euclid. Yes, algebra. Let's go through algebra. Now, algebra, they're going to tell us, is an Arabic word. It was studied in Europe. Algebra is a branch of mathematics, an advanced form that studies abstract systems. Elementary algebra is the main form of algebra that's taught in schools. It examines mathematical statements using different variables, yes, for unspecified values, and seeks to determine for which values the statements are true. So from these things, it's like religion was science. Now, this is going to be very difficult for people, yes, but I'm going to go through it. It's because the Kaaba is a cube, Yes, and I pointed out before that it's basically a tesseract or a hypercube. It's not a normal cube, it's a hypercube once we look at it from above, and it's a cube within a cube or a double cube. That's what it is. When we look at it, and then we see people are rotating around it, but why do they go around it 7 times? Yes, and all these other things, it's got something to do with sacred geometry. The entire system is based on a very advanced sacred geometry that the people of the deserts could not have invented this system. But anyway, let's go through some of these things. And but my book, The Science of the Kaaba, it goes through the introduction. It goes through the introduction, and you know, once you go to university, Jesus Christ set up an advanced scientific system, not for many of these people who say, oh, I understand science and religion. I understand the Bible just like that. I'm using dictionaries. I understand the Quran. I'm using dictionaries. We see many of these videos made by people, you know, who are just, you know, cowboy jobs. Let's go through some real things to do with Euclid. It's because Jesus Christ was a professor. He did miracles that were very advanced things that many people believed in at the time, and these stories have arrived to us today. And it's a miracle that existence is there just to exist. It's a miracle that we're alive. It's a miracle that the forces of science exist. Now, sacred geometry is for these type of people who believe in miracles. Yes? If you don't believe in it, it's not for you. The sun just doesn't move around. The moon doesn't move around by accident. A force moves it. Somebody created that force. Now that is the grand architect in Freemasonry. So within the Brotherhood of Freemasonry, yeah, one would say, if I'm a Freemason, we would say, hey, the grand architect designed this. So if you are not somebody who understands these miraculous things, you will not be able to understand this miraculous science and advanced science that Christ was speaking about, that's based on faith. To talk about the Kaaba, once again, is based on the flower of life. The flower of life represents everything, and it's not a cube, but it's based on the concept of a cube within a dodecahedron. Yes, if anybody understands this. Yes, a cube within a dodecahedron, and that's what the Kaaba is. And the dodecahedron is not a cube, and so it depends where you are looking at it from. And when you're looking at it from certain projections, it forms different shapes, and that's what the dimensions of the Kaaba are. It's basically a tesseract. And when people rotate it, and when the heavens rotate and the stars rotate in one direction, humans rotating in another, and time goes around another. So now let me explain to you this thing about Euclid and what we can find. Okay, I'm going to read this. People could read along with this and study this in their own time. The projective special linear group, L, which equals 19, it represents the abstract structure of the 57 cell, which is a universal 4 polytope with a total of 171. And it must be noted that 171 is 9 times 19 edges and vertices, and 57, which is also 3 times 19. And notice that both of them are multiples of 19. And this 57 are actually hemi-icosahedral cells that are self-dual. Now, I know that many people will find it difficult to understand this. So now if people pay attention to the screen, I'm going to go through these things a bit more specifically. So a projective linear group, which is L19 in mathematics, especially in the group theoretic area of algebra. Yes, it is the projective linear group, also known as the projective general linear group, or PGL. It is the induced action of the general linear group of a vector space known as V on the associated projective space P, which is V. Well, people could study more about this themselves, and but when people understand this more, you could see the shapes and everything to do with the universal designs and how the Muslims pray around Mecca, and the universal clock and everything. And soon people will understand how the Islamic system works. The entire system of how they pray, how they wash their hands and everything, it's basically miraculous. And it's based on this Euclidean system or Platonic system or the system that Jesus Christ was talking about. And some people created it based on that. So now to the next part, the projective special linear group L, which equals 19, which represents the abstract structure of the 57 cell. Now let me explain what is the 57 cell in mathematics. It is known as the pentacontaheptacoron, yes, which is a self-dual abstract regular for polytype. Its 57 cells are hemi-dodecahedra. Yes, and notice the dodecahedra is the pentagon with the 5 sides. So now when we look at this pentagon, the 5 sides and the 57 cell of the pentacontaheptacoron, yes, what we will find is that from there we can understand why they have the 5 daily prayers. Yes, and so these 57 cells, or the 57 cells in the pentacontaheptacoron, yes, these 57 cells are hemi-dodecahedra. So when we look at the dodecahedron, yes, when it forms the 12 around it with the 12 bubbles, when there's the 12 water bubbles, only under those conditions in the universe will it form the dodecahedron. And the dodecahedron, as we noticed, if people go back, if people read my books, it goes through the basics so that people can understand it. So the dodecahedra represents the universe, or the Arsh, or the Reich. Yes, the Reich for the Holy Roman Emperors that had Arabic writing on their clothes. I'll go through that in a minute about the Reich, or the Rush, or that's why it was called the Madarasha, where people are studying the science and the entire system that's based on the Quran. This is what they were doing in the past. Yes, so when we look at the hemidodecahedra, yes, it has 57 vertices, 171 edges, and 171 two-dimensional faces. This should not be forgotten, because that itself is a multiple of 19, 9 times 19. In geometry, a vertex is a point where 2 or more curves, lines or edges meet or intersect. And the 57 hemi-icosahedral, yes, that we find, it's basically an abstract regular polyhedron that contains half the faces of a regular icosahedron. This 57, once again, it's important to note, which is actually a multiple of 19, or 3 times 19, 3 times 19, these hemi-icosahedral cells that are actually not just normal, but they're self-duals. To understand the self-dual in geometry, every polyhedron is associated with a second dual structure, where the vertices of one of them correspond to the faces of the other, and the edges between the pairs of vertices of one corresponds to the edges between the pairs of the faces of the other. In total, there are 19 Coxeter groups of non-prismatic uniform honeycombs. Honeycombs is just a term. Yes, I'll show that in a minute. In the 4th dimension, we are living in the 3rd dimension. And notice that I said that the Kaaba represents a tesseract, which actually shows the 4th dimension. This is very important. So now there are 19 Coxeter groups. So basically in mathematics, a Coxeter group is an abstract group that admits a formal description in terms of reflections. And the finite Coxeter groups are precisely the finite Euclidean reflection groups. The 19 Coxeter groups of non-prismatic uniform honeycombs. So in geometry, a uniform 5 polytype is a 5-dimensional uniform polytype. By definition, or to be simple, yes, a uniform 5 polytype, which is the 5-dimensional uniform polytype, is vertex transitive and constructed from uniform 4 polytope facets. Now the 5 Coxeter honeycomb exists in Euclidean space. while the other 14 Coxeter groups are compact and paracompact hyperbolic honeycomb groups. There are also specifically 19 uniform honeycombs inside the Euclidean tesseract honeycomb. This is what we see in four-dimensional space. How the cube, or we have the double cube, and this is what we can see in the Tree of Life. There is the double cube, and then once you understand the double cube and the 666, and what they say is the nautical miles distance, which they fraudulently invented it, but there's reasons why they did it. 666 nautical miles between the Kaaba and Jerusalem, and why there is so much violence around Jerusalem. That's another story. Yes, and that temple, if they ever build it, has advantages. We'll have to go through that some other time. But anyway, so here is the four-dimensional tesseract and how it works, and this is what you see when Muslims are rotating around the Kaaba. It's going in the opposite direction, but the Kaaba itself is a cube within a cube. Many people don't realize this, or a double cube. Yes, and the double cube is the hypercube. Yes, so here it is. And so now, to make it clear, in five-dimensional space, there are 19 uniform polytopes. Yes, so as we saw, yes, in the projective special linear group L, which is 19, it represents the abstract structure of the 57 cell of a universal four polytope. Yes, and an abstract polytope is an algebraic partially ordered set which captures the dyadic property of traditional polytope without specifying pure geometric properties such as points and lines. So now in the uniform polytope of dimension 3 or higher, or in the third dimension or higher, is a vertex transitive polytope. And notice here that they've shown we've got the hexagon, and you know, my book explains the cube within the hexagon, and so, but anyway, yes, all of these things has got to do with going to the third or fourth dimension. And when people pray to God, of course you want your prayers to reach the third, fourth, fifth, or whatever dimension, higher dimensions, and the objective of life is to go to heaven or to higher dimensions. But I'll read it again. In geometry, a uniform polytope of 3 dimensions or higher is a vertex transitive polytope bounded by uniform facets. Here, vertex transitive means that it has symmetries, taking every vertex to every vertex the same, and the same must also be true within each lower dimensional face, etc., etc. Let me just show you here. Yes, so the hexagon here, it goes a bit clearer, that when we see this hexagon, yes, many people are thinking, why is these 19 codes and the cube of Saturn and everything? Yeah, people could be superstitious, the rings of Saturn. Oh, by the way, there's rings on the planet Jupiter. Oh, does it mean they're following Jupiter? You know, so you'll see many Quranists and many Islamists who are talking about this, but basically they're a bunch of liars or uneducated people because they have no idea about sacred geometry or anything or how the universe works. But their Quran tells them, examine, the universe, look up and look again, etc. The Quran tells them and says, you're going to find the ayats of God or the signs or the verses of God there, not just in the oral Quran. So they're just a bunch of liars, unfortunately. But now let's have a look at this simplex symmetry. So in 5-dimensional geometry, there are 19 uniform polytopes with A5 symmetry, and there is one self-dual regular form for the 5 simplex with 6 vertices. Here is where it gets interesting. Pay attention. There are infinitely many finite volume Weinberg polytopes up through to basically the 19th dimension. Notice 19th dimension, which generates hyperbolic. Hyperbolic geometry is said to be a non-Euclidean geometry, but we don't exactly know what is Euclidean and what is not. It's based on these alleged manuscripts that they found and distributed during and after the Renaissance. Many of them weren't widespread until the 19th or even the 20th century. So when we get to the 19th dimension, which generates hyperbolic tilings with the degenerate simplex, quadrilateral, pyramidal domains as well as prismatic domains and otherwise. But Weinberg polytopes of the lowest rank basically, or n+2 mirrors, yes, exist up through basically to the 17th dimension. Notice it's 17. And when the Muslims pray 5 times a day, they have something called 17 rakats for 6 days of the week. And notice that the hexagon's got 6, but the 7 days in a week. And things like this. My book explains this more, to do with the number 17. It explains it more. Yes? But basically when we get up through to the 17th dimension, there exists a unique figure there with 19 facets. Basically, in geometry, a facet is a feature of a polyhedron, polytope, or related geometric structure, generally of dimension 1 less than the structure itself. But this is going a bit advanced, but once you understand this Euclidean geometry in different dimensions, then you will understand why many people are using the number 19 and why it's the alpha and the omega, the 1 and the 9, and why many events are organized looking at things from the fourth dimension, because then you will be able to see everything within the 3rd dimension. But as you could see, it's very advanced, and to understand the basics, which introduces people so that they could go further, it's all in my book, Science of the Kaaba. So basically we could go on and on and on. It's a lot deeper what all of this is. Yes, what's actually going on to do with Euclidean geometry. And what they've created at Mecca and the system in Mecca is so advanced and so deep, I don't even know what to tell you. Yes, but all the information about these things, you're going to find it in my book, Science of the Kaaba. And if anybody says they knew this information from anywhere else or heard it before, I'm sure they're lying. Prove it. Yes, and basically Islam is a scientific religion, and the original Islam, original Christianity, it was scientific. Jesus Christ not only fought for freedom but for science. And the reason why they falsified science in history is so that you can't understand the sacred geometry. Yes, you can't understand it. And if anybody has read any of my other books, I made the Kabbalah easy. I made the 33 degrees easy. And once you understand the lies of the 33rd degree, you're ready for the sacred geometry. And so a lot of it is based on the cube. It's based on the cube. In fact, if one should know, the dodecahedron has a cube inside it, and the dodecahedron represents the universe, and the universe are everything. And that's why in the Quran itself it says God's throne is basically everything. It extends from the heavens to the earth, and so that's the dodecahedron, and inside that is the cube. Yes, and so those are very important things. And my books have more information. It will take too long to read out the full book here. Yeah, so if people are thinking, where did this system come from? Why are they bowing on the floor? Yeah, I've heard these Quranists, who don't know anything about science or geometry. I challenged many of them. I said, can you tell me? Your book says that the ayats or verses of God, yes, says look at the water. And I asked them, what are these signs of water? Not a single one could even tell me. Not a single one. I asked them many of these things, and they were just saying, the Kaaba's pagan. Oh, there's a stone thing there. It represents, something sexual. Oh, they're just a bunch of liars. If Charles Darwin was here, Charles Darwin would have called them, uneducated chimpanzees, monkeys, or apes. Yes? And that's all they're doing. But if people want to understand history and the truth and what is your life about, what is your destiny is to die. This is the reality. This is the reality. And how are we going to understand the human function? Scientifically, yes, your ears are there to hear. That's science. It's sacred geometry, it's fixed. Yes, you can't change. what your ears are there for. Your ears are not there for walking. Yes, your eyes are there to see. Your eyes are not there for eating. You're not eating food through your eyes. So the function of humans and the function of the universe and the function of everything has a function. Like when we see in farming, there's some insects that are helping to do with growth of plants and seeds and pollen and other things. Then there's other insects that are eating one group of insects, but we find them as a pest, but they're eating a group of insects which are dangerous to our farming produce. But those insects are needed for fertilization or some other things. So everything has a purpose and a reason. So the Quran tells you about the sacred geometry, and Jesus Christ himself, yes, was basically a professor. Yes, and he was a prophet. And so many of the miracles he did and all these other things, were to show some things that are in science also, and not only to show the purpose of miracles. Well, anyway, more information about that is in my book. And in this book, I go through many serious issues such as, is the Kaaba in Mecca a stargate? Is it the gateway to travel to another world? And it goes through the question of what is the sacred geometry of the Kaaba. It goes through the subject of, do the Muslims worship Saturn? And who really built the Kaaba and why? Is the Kaaba really thousands of years old? And what is the stone at the Kaaba? It also, my book also goes through the issue, are the Muslims praying in the wrong direction? Is the Kaaba located in the wrong place? And why do Muslims pray 5 times a day? And are the Muslims doing rituals and sacrifices? Are they doing crazy things? Or what exactly are they doing? Also, the book goes through who is preparing for Judgment Day, or the day that people will meet God. Also, the book goes through the concept of what is the order of heaven and the concept of heaven on earth. Also, this book goes through the subject about the manuscripts of the Quran and the invention of the Arabic language and the connection between the Jesuits and Freemasonry and Islam and many other issues about the Arabic language. Yes, and the book basically examines the sakr or secret or the sacred science and the secret history of the Kaaba.